Hey friends, thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to go ahead and finish a wood project using polyurethane. Alright friends, so when you use polyurethane, there are so many different types and brands you can choose. For some projects, I like an oil-based product. For others, I like a water-based product. This Minwax polyacrylic is a water-based product, so I can wash out my brush with soap and water. I like that for the school. I like that for projects that students do, because then they don't have to have mineral spirits to clean out their brush, and they can use the same brush over and over by just washing it out with soap and water. And this stuff does a pretty good job. It's not as hard as some of the other oil-based finishes, but overall it does a pretty good job. It does really good on our checkerboards, on our checker pieces, on our little stools, things like that. So we're gonna go ahead and use this for today to put a finish on this little bench that I recently made. Okay, so when we do finishes, there are many steps that we have to adhere to get a really good finish on this. And this was taught to me by an older woodworker, and so I'm sure there's many different ways to do this. This is the way I was taught. This is the way I currently do things to put a nice finish on wood projects. So number one, the first thing, after you're done sanding, I always wipe it down with a wet paper towel. Get all that extra sawdust off, get it out of the nooks and crannies. I wipe it down with a wet paper towel, and then I let it dry. Now I don't get it soaking wet. I just wet a paper towel down, wring the water out, and then wipe it all down, get all of that sawdust, or get all the water out, the extra water, so we can get all that sawdust off of it. The next step I do is I get my polyurethane and I open it and stir the polyurethane. You do not shake polyurethane. You shake finish, you shake stain, not polyurethane. That will put bubbles in your poly, and those bubbles will be in your, when you brush it on, it'll be on your project, and it'll just be little bumps all over the place. So you get a stir stick before you open this up, and then you stir it. All right, friends, now you are ready to start brushing on your finish. I like to use a bristle brush. I don't like to use a foam brush for polyurethane. I think it puts too many air bubbles in the poly. I like a foam brush or a rag for putting on stain, but I'm not gonna stain this. I want the natural wood to show through. So I'm gonna use just a bristle brush for this. So then you make sure you have paper towels, and I always start on the underside, and then you brush this poly on in nice, even strokes. Sometimes I see students brushing like this, brush, 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 brush. That's not the optimal way to put on polyurethane. You want to put it on in nice, even strokes. And you don't want it to be super thick in one area or super thin. So if you're brushing and you see some dry areas, you need to stop and get more polyurethane and then dab your brush. So I don't put it on like that. I'll go ahead and just dab my brush a little bit and then apply it with nice, even strokes, so everything is getting covered evenly. So I always do the bottom first, and then I end with the top. Now on this piece, this furniture, this bench, I'm not going to do the bottom of the feet. I'm not going to put polyurethane on there. And so when I get this done, I can just flip it over. If I was going to put polyurethane on that, I would want to let this coat dry before I flipped it over, so that I wouldn't be gluing the feet down to my paper towels, which is another thing you always want to try to do, is put paper towels underneath your project so you're not going to glue the project to the table you're working on. So after I get all this done, I'm gonna let it dry for probably a whole day. I'll just let it sit for a day. And then after that, I'm going to take some super fine sandpaper, or most of the time, I'll just use steel wool. I'll use steel wool, like a 4/0 steel wool, and I'll lightly just sand it, and I'm not taking any finish off. I'm just knocking down the high spots. Sometimes, the way it was told to me is polyurethane raises the grain of lumber, and so where you have the grain like this, it'll kind of raise that grain, and then it'll create bumps and stuff. And also, if there's any dust in the air, that can settle on your project and create little bumps. So you take steel wool and you lightly sand every part of it with steel wool. Then you wipe that with a terry cloth, which is kind of a cloth that's sticky. You can use a terry cloth. You can use a wet paper towel, which is what I use a lot of the times. And then you can apply another coat. After your second coat, you repeat the same steps. You lightly hit it with steel wool. Then you take a tack, not a terry cloth, you take a tack cloth, which is like a sticky cloth. Then you wipe it all down with that, get all this, any steel wool remnants off of there. Then you can poly it a third time. And I usually do 2 to 3 coats, depending on what the project is and depending on how the coats look. If it's a something where it doesn't get a whole lot of use, if it's not going to get, not like a table or a chair or a bench or something like that, then I'll only give it 2 coats. But if it's something that will get a lot of use, a lot of wear, I go ahead and I put 3 coats on it just to protect it a little bit more. So that's what I do, folks. That's how I finish projects. That's what I teach in my classes, because that's the way I learned it. So, moving forward, if there's a step that I forgot, or if there's a step that you would recommend I do, go ahead and leave that in the comments and tell me what you would do instead, or what I should do to make a better finished project. Okay, so I'm finishing this top. Remember to always check for drips. If you're doing the edge, I always like to work from the edge in both ways. So I'll take my stain, or my poly, excuse me, and I'll brush this way. I'll get right to the edge and I'll brush this way. I don't like to brush that way or like towards the end and off, because that will produce more drips, where if I'm brushing in, the polyurethane has a tendency to go in and it's not more apt to have a drip. So you always want to, when you're all done, make sure you wipe the edges so you don't have any drips. You don't have little drips on the edge of your project. All right, folks, so there you go. That's how I finish a project. Now you can go ahead and finish your projects the same way, or you can change it up and do a different way, however you've learned. I do want to thank you for watching today. Go ahead and hit the like, the comment, or like and subscribe, and then leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the process. If you have a different way, go ahead and let me know that. I would like to learn your process if you have a different one. But thanks so much for watching, and make sure you work hard because hard work is its own reward.